Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I am Mike Coletta.
And this week we are moving on ahead. Chapter 9 in the Ultimate History of Video Games, Volume 2 by Stephen L. Kent. Please go buy this book. It is great, and we don't talk about everything in it because it's really big and really full of information.
That's right. It's a book club. It's a book club. This chapter is titled Slightly Less Horrifying Than I Imagined. It's a great name for a chapter, I think. The chapter actually opens with Ngai Kroll. I hope I'm saying that right. It's N''G-A-I Kroll, C-R-O-A-L. And they're a really well-known video game reporter at Newsweek, actually. And they even mentioned that he convinced Newsweek to do a weekly video game segment, which is awesome. And it opens with a story about trying to get the 5 legendary members of the industry together. And I'm really not going to talk about this right now because it seemed like a nice little aside to open the chapter, but it's definitely not related to the history of this chapter as we It almost felt like it was a fun little story to intro it, but to kind of show you where the industry was at the time and how not necessarily these essentially just the whole point of it was that these designers don't hate each other, but their companies they work for hate each other kind of in a way or don't get along. And that's why it's there. But if you want to know more about it, like Tyler said, buy the book. Okay, it's a really good book.
I think that's kind of a common thing in the industry of the people at different companies certainly almost never hate each other unless there's a personal thing, a personal beef that went down. But these companies are definitely in huge competition. And because of that, you see people jump between companies all the time. And it's just nope, there's not really a lot of loyalty necessarily. And I think that's a good thing. But yeah, it is interesting to see the way that companies that just fight tooth and nail fiercely, and then one person will just move from the company they were just trashing, or to the company they were just trashing. And you're just oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I think I didn't write this down, but there's definitely a person later on in this chapter that works at Sony and is really good friends at Sony, and then moves on to work at Microsoft. That's just a thing, they're moving on to another company.
Yeah, well, Peter Moore worked at Sega, and then he worked at EA, and then he worked at Microsoft, or maybe I got the order wrong there, but he worked at a lot of different places that were in competition with each other.
Yeah, you got to bounce around. So Chapter 9 is mostly focused on handheld systems, which is something that, as a podcast, I feel like we've neglected a little bit. Mm-hmm. We talk about it a little bit, but not a lot. And obviously the Game Boy was a huge console when it released in 1989. But I love that Kent briefly talks about the Game.com, released by Tiger Electronics in 1997.
Ugh.
This was trying to be...
It is only a step, barely a step up from those Tiger LCD games. Yeah. It's not great. Anyway, sorry.
I still have some Tiger LCD games, but yeah, it was trying to be the Tiger Electronics version of an iPhone before an iPhone. Yeah. So as you can imagine, it did not go well. It was a PDA. It had a touchscreen, it had a stylus, and most importantly, it did a terrible job playing games. And while the screenshots looked great, apparently Kent says the frame rate was so bad. And this is my great quote from Kent that I love. This chapter goes, quote, "The Game.com version of Duke Nukem played like a slideshow." Quote. Yeah, I like that he touches on this. It's definitely one of those, could be a forgotten console for sure. I don't know if there's enough there. I'll have to look into it if we dive more into this. And we'll definitely use this part of the book because he goes into more detail. But I love these obscure consoles. I'm a huge fan of learning about them. And it's just super fun. But Kent then touches briefly on the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance. Game Boy Advance sold over 20 million units by the end of 2002, and the Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire games were only beat out by Super Smash Bros. Melee in sales in Japan. They beat every other game.
Dang. At this time. That goes to show how popular Smash Bros. Was. Holy moly.
Yeah, Smash Bros. Was crazy. And Pokemon Ruby, Pokemon Sapphire were also really great. And so it's it's just Nintendo just dominating Japan in 2002 when you think about it.
Just really crushing it.
But here's where we get the big divergence between Nintendo and all other video game, and you could say electronics companies, whether that's portable or PC. We're talking about the internet. And while Pokemon Leaf Green and Fire Red brought wireless connectivity to the Game Boy Advance if you were in 3 feet of one another, that was important too, it didn't go online. And the world was quickly shifting that way. So Kent cites WoW, World of Warcraft, Halo, and EverQuest, and a bunch of other games, and how internet usage around the world is increasing. I think the stat of this time period for internet was this quote on page 200 regarding how they broke down online users globally, and Asia was in first at 230 million, then North America at 215, and then Europe at 203 million. And it's cool because I didn't really think about it, but yeah, Asia had the internet cafes, which really got a lot of people online, like way more than the US, which I think is cool and that's partially why they beat us in that sense.
Yeah. When they have a whole culture over there of hanging out in internet cafes and playing games together. It's like a social thing for kids to go and hang and play games together, like in cafes like that. And I think that's because, and maybe Matt in Japan can help set the record straight here, but I think a lot of that is because there tend to be like smaller living areas, and so they don't have room for like a desktop computer, and so they just go to PC cafes to play games. And in places like China, they didn't have consoles. Like Nintendo wasn't there for the longest time. Sony wasn't there. Like they weren't allowed to have consoles that weren't made in China for the longest time, but they did have PCs.
It goes right back to the Xbox and how it didn't do well in Japan because it was huge.
Yeah. Too big to put under your TV.
Too big. It was the size of a Japanese washing machine. That's way too big. It's way too big. So you might be asking right now, like, who is going to dethrone Nintendo in the portable handheld console department and the connected video game market? Well, of course, it's Nokia.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, for sure. They know how to make portable games.
Yeah, first and foremost, super pumped that Stephen L. Kent mentioned Snake, because as someone who loved to play Snake in high school, it is still just as popular in high schools, except now kids play it on Google Chromebooks when they're not supposed to, and they're supposed to be working. So it's still a thing, just so everyone knows. I didn't even have a Nokia phone. I would borrow my friend's phone to play Snake on their phone. That's how
I would
much
borrow
I
my dad's phone to play Snake on. I didn't. I was not of phone getting age when those were popular.
Gosh, it's a great game though. So this is where Nokia tries to make the N-Gage. Now, the N-Gage could use its own episode, but we're just going to talk about how it was kind of an oof moment for Nokia. I'm so glad I wasn't old enough to get hyped for tech like this like I am now, because I feel like if I did, it would just be like really sad, and it would kind of dissuade me from being hyped about anything.
I would have got hyped for it for sure. I mean, I did get hyped for it, but I knew I was never going to get it, so I didn't allow myself to get too hyped for it.
Yeah, that's the key. See, don't get too hyped because it's just going to disappoint you, the N-Gage. So the whole hype machine of the London Eye Ferris wheel, where they had this like big marketing moment where the entire 25-minute trip around the Ferris wheel, journalists can try out the N-Gage and just have their minds blown. And oh boy, was it not what they hoped it would be. Aww. Essentially, there was a lot of problems with the N-Gage. The big one was how there was like a hinge on the device, and that's where the microphone and speaker are, because while it was shaped like a taco, it still has to be a phone when you think about it. The other problems too is that you have a bazillion buttons on the right side because you need to dial phone numbers. So it just is weird. You can look at pictures of the N-Gage, and yeah, it looks like it plays games, but it also is definitely a phone, you know?
Yeah, but like a really weird looking phone too. Like it wasn't quite a phone either in that same sense, you know?
It was like a Game Boy Advance with a 9 button dials on the right. It was just really, really weird. And it really shows you how like the reason the iPhone was so successful is you could switch it out with the touchscreen. Like the touchscreen, like it's a phone when the touchscreen shows it, and then it's games when it's not. It's like it just shows that technology just wasn't there yet, but they tried it. And
sure did.
Also the screen, another thing they mentioned too is like the screen resolution and size was not sized like other portables at the time, so it made the ports really weird. But
yeah, it was like taller than it was wide, because it was like a phone screen of the day, you know? And it was so it was not meant for games. Like, ugh.
It was really awkward. But the biggest problem, the biggest flaw came when you wanted to change your game. You had to remove the battery to
so you had to like turn it off, power it down.
Oh, here it is. Here's the quote on page 204. This is the only quote I'm reading this episode because it's a long one, but I feel like it's really important for the listener to get the full experience of why the N-Gage was a flop like it was. So here we go. Quote, "The N-Gage's biggest problem is an astonishing design flaw that all but eliminates the machine's functionality as a mobile device. Better put, you can play games on the go, but should you decide you want to play another game once you're out, good luck. To play a game or insert a new memory card with your MP3s, you'll need to turn the N-Gage off, remove the back cover, remove the battery, insert the cartridge, replace the battery, replace the back cover, power on the N-Gage, wait just shy of 30 seconds for the machine to power up, load your game. All totaled, it's about a 90-second process. Worse,
And that's if you're like speed running it, right?
Yeah, totally. Worse, it's practically impossible to do it if you're on some form of public transportation. And because the games are on MMC cards, wafer thin and 1 inch long, if you drop one in a crowded environment, recovering it could be tricky. At $30 a game, that's a risky proposition. End quote.
True. But I would say you could make that same argument about Switch games today, that they're very small and you drop it, it's gone, right?
That's true. I honestly, what maybe when you said like, if you're speedrunning it, it makes me think like maybe there's a guy who gets like really good at changing out games on his N-Gage. The same way like a Civil War soldier got really good at changing out their musket.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
It's that guy that's like really good at like, no, it's not a problem, man. He just goes zip, 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 and he just changes it.
I just picture like a cup stacking like competitor who's now doing N-Gage game swapping, like, you know, and they're like clapping their hands while they do it. There's a whole rhythm, you know?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly it. And the best part about this whole N-Gage thing, I didn't write it down here, but there's a moment in the book where they talk about how someone sees someone using an N-Gage, like, and they use the term in the wild. I just thought that was really great. So on top of this whole like battery flaw, there's even more problems with the N-Gage. They had a pre-show at E3, and it was a really like painfully awkward show of how business executives are super out of touch.
Oh,
they describe it in the book, and it's just there's that on top of it, and it sucks because the N-Gage was gonna be really cool. Like this list of features for the time is pretty revolutionary. The N-Gage had games, it had a phone, it had an FM radio, MP3 player, and it also had support signed off by Activision, EA, Sega, and THQ. They were all like down to develop for it, but it was just the design of that first model really like hindered the whole thing. Kent has a quote that estimates that 30,000 units were sold, which is nothing. You know, that's very low. And then they tried to make an N-Gage QD, which dropped the MP3 and FM radio functionality, but by then like the damage had already been done. And I kind of did some Googling on the side, and according to this, so this was like 2002, right? The N-Gage lifespan ended around 2006 is when like the last support for it kind of ended. So it had a 4-year run, so I guess it's not a complete flop immediately, but it just didn't do what people thought it would.
What do you think the QD stands for?
Quality design.
I think, and I remember hearing this must have been on Tech TV, or maybe it was even ZD TV back in the day, that it stood for quick do-over. That's the joke they made on. That's the joke that was made on some probably Fresh Gear. Where my Tech TV friends at Fresh Gear.
Hey, man, we should definitely do an episode on those old TV shows too.
Gosh, I watched every episode of every one of those TV shows. Tech TV is a formative experience for me in my life.
You're an expert, which is why I think we should do it. You know, I have the world's foremost Tech TV expert as my co-host on this podcast. I want to talk about it, essentially.
I miss that channel.
So now it's time to talk about the reason you're probably here, and we're all really here, the PSP, the PlayStation Portable. The PSP was fully designed to be a Game Boy killer, and in a sense, like, technologically, it definitely succeeded. The PSP specs and the UMD technology used to play games in their cartridges was really incredible for the time. The UMD Universal Media Discs were 30 times larger than Game Boy Advance cartridges, which when I read that, my jaw dropped, and I was like, wow, this either proves that Sony is on the cusp of technology or Nintendo refuses to change, and I can't tell if it's a bit of both. It might be a bit of both.
I think that the UMD thing, like, is very cool on paper. Like, it's a superior storage format because of how much more that it holds, but I think it fails to take into account the portability factor in that, like, carrying around, I mean, I guess people did this with CDs, so maybe it's not really a problem, but like people carrying around a spinning device in their pocket like that, like that's just begging to get scratched, right? When you're playing games on it? I don't know.
Yeah, but then you sell more UMDs, big Sonys.
Yeah, I guess so. And like loading times on a handheld seems like, I think I would index more towards faster loading times and less storage space than I would towards more storage space. But hey, you know, I guess it worked out for him.
You know what? You heard it here first, folks. Tyler, anti-PSP. I'm just kidding.
I loved my PSP. I played a lot of PSP games. So jokes on me.
I wish I would have gotten a PSP. I feel like I was a full Game Boy fanboy, and I'm realizing now that it was not a mistake, but definitely something I missed out on in my video game childhood.
That
also,
was one
you could play movies.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
You could download movies to it if you had a big memory stick, which not many people had big memory sticks back in the day. But you could also just buy them on those UMDs, which was pretty sweet. And they were like sub DVD quality, but who cares? It was on a small screen anyway.
They put a lot of them out too. They had a lot of movies.
Yeah,
on
they
UMD.
really did. They did a good job putting them out. The only problem was if you bought one of those movies, which costs as much as a DVD, you couldn't watch it on your TV too. So you were just buying it to watch on your PSP. And like there were hookups, like you could hook your PSP up to a TV, and like there were ways to do it. But it was definitely, once you got it on a TV, it was definitely a lower video quality than a DVD.
Yeah.
So
that wasn't the only aspect of the PSP that made it dominate over the Game Boy, though. The PSP screen had twice the resolution of the Game Boy Advance, so that's pretty rough for a Game Boy Advance. It played MP3 files, and as Ken Kutaragi put it in his presentation, it was the, quote, Walkman of the 21st century, which is kind of really good marketing because they made the Walkman too, so they're just looking like, hey, look at us, we make everything cool. And it worked, on me at least. I love my Walkman. Okay, so my favorite part of this section, though, is definitely how Kent mentions that Hiroshi Yamauchi of Nintendo would be frustrated and say the PSP and Sony were just making technology for technology's sake. It's a quote, which I love because that's kind of been Nintendo's whole MO this whole time. They're not into new tech as much as they're into great gaming experiences. And they were doing that back in 2002, 2003.
Mm-hmm. They put out old hardware with good games and it seems to do okay.
That's what they're all about. So what is revealed in this section, though, that I thought was pretty much the whole like cusp of what's going on here, which I thought was really cool, is the PSP was initially just an idea. When they announced it, they didn't have anything. They just had these ideas of what it would be, but they didn't have any like physical models or designs yet. This section at the end of this, this section, it follows Mike Mika and Chris Charla, who are founders of the studio Digital Eclipse, and they stumbled into Sony not having nearly anything when they announced the PSP. So first, Mika asks a friend at Sony who says, quote, I can tell you this, it's just a memo. Like at this point, it's only on paper.
Just the CEO goes out there or whoever and is just like, we're going to make this. And like everybody at Sony was like, we're going to do what?
Yeah, they treated it the same way NASA was like, we're going to the moon. Do you have any ideas? Not yet, but we'll get there. It's fine. The PSP didn't even have like hardware to show developers really. Like I love the story that ends the section where Mike Mika and Chris Charla talk to Sony executives on their smoke breaks. Like they hang out outside the building and pretend that they're working with someone there. And they do this just to get like in at Sony, and it works. So they get the emulator that Sony gave to developers because they didn't have any like physical dev kits. They just had a PSP emulator. And then they put their game, Digital Eclipse game, Death Jr. on it. And when they show Sony that they have their game Death Jr. playing on this PSP emulator, like they have a meeting and then they keep like can you wait here a second? And then they bring people in. They do the presentation again. They bring people in, they do the presentation again, because it was the first game that worked on this emulator. Like Sony was just like, wow, we're seeing it for the first time. We love it. And Death Jr. did come out like early on in the PSP life cycle. So it's good for them. You know, that's not only is this a story about how Sony didn't have it really all together. They were kind of like flying by the seat of their pants. It's also the story of how Digital Eclipse was really resourceful in trying to get stuff done. So I like that story a lot.
So then we get to this section called Yamauchi's Crazy Idea. Now, remember, at this point in time, Nintendo is king of the mobile castle. Like you were saying earlier, the Game Boy Color crushed it. Game Boy Advance crushed it. Sega tried to dethrone them with the Game Gear in the early 90s, which was another technologically superior handheld. It just had too many drawbacks to make a dent in the Game Boy's dominance. Mostly batteries. Man, there were a lot of batteries involved with the Game Gear. 6 AA's only got you like 2 or 3 hours of playtime out of it compared to the 20 plus hours you would get out of 4 AA's on the original Game Boy. So when you're on the go, you can't be swapping batteries out all the time. You got to get good at it, like our speedrunner who speedruns switching out N-Gage cartridges.
That's right. I didn't realize, by the way, that the whole reason they didn't have a backlit screen for the longest time as an intentional design decision because they chose battery life over backlit screen. And I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about that.
Yep. Yeah, they did eventually put out the Game Boy Light in Japan. That was not great. It was like a weird backlight, but they intentionally would not do that to save battery life. Like that was really important to them. And I think they did a good job on that. But it was not important to Sega with the Game Gear or the Nomad, which the Nomad was cooler than people give it credit for, I think, because that thing played full-on Sega Genesis games. It was like the size of a Game Gear. Well, it was a little bit bigger. And it played full-on Genesis games. And you could hook it up to your TV. And you could plug in a second controller. That thing was way cool.
That's like futuristic.
Yeah,
time
I
for
want
what
one of
they're
those.
doing.
It was the Switch before the Switch. Let's be real.
Exactly. I think we just have a hard take on this podcast. No, I don't think it's a hot take. I think it's a hard stance take that the Sega Nomad was the Switch before the Switch.
Yeah, Sega did it first.
Yeah, take that, Nintendo.
Yeah. Anyway, all this to say that Nintendo had been challenged before by technology that was better than their own. They had that handheld dominance, but they were really feeling the pain when it came to consoles at this time. So Kent kind of takes a little bit of a detour here to talk about, once again, how bad the GameCube is, sales-wise. In the GameCube days, they were kind of dark for Nintendo as far as consoles went, in terms of sales at least. Not as bad as the Wii U, but at least Nintendo wasn't like riding the high. With the Wii U, Nintendo was like riding that high of the original Wii, right? Which they weren't really able to do with the GameCube because the Nintendo 64 hadn't done as well. Even the Super Nintendo was like not as big of a thing as the NES was. So GameCube was the end of some dark days. As they say, it's darkest before the dawn. The GameCube is when it was darkest, right? It didn't sell well compared to the competition, but they did turn a profit on every system sold. And I want to make this clear too. Somebody says this in the book. There's a quote in there from Jeff Brown. He talks about, he gives this analogy about coming in third in the console wars doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you're losing money. It doesn't mean that you're like going out of business, right? It just means you sold less than the other two people if you come in last. You can still make a lot of money by selling the third most consoles. And Nintendo did make a lot of money because they made a profit on every GameCube that they sold, something that Sony wouldn't do for a long time with the PS2. They were losing money on every PS2 sold. And Microsoft would never do with the Xbox. I think they always sold the Xbox at a loss, the original Xbox. So,
yeah, I think and this is definitely a thing with today and the way of thinking today. Like if you're not first, you're last. Like like with when you talk to someone that's like really into like arguing about PlayStation or Xbox, it's like they're the best console. They treat it like those other ones are failing. When it's like, no, they're just still rolling in money. It's fine.
Everybody is making money here. It's fine.
The only person that cares about if PlayStation is better or Xbox is better are the fanboys yelling about it on the internet. They're the only people that care. I bet you numbers wise, they'd want to be more, but they're still making money. It's not the end of the world for people that are executives of these companies.
Right. So Jeff Brown says it's like telling ABC, the broadcasting company ABC, that they should get out of broadcasting business just because they're in third, because they're behind NBC and CBS, right?
Seems reasonable.
No, they're still making tons of money, just not as much money, right? So anyway, that's my rant, and Kent talks about that as well. Of no, just because you're in last doesn't mean you're losing or that you are gonna go out of business.
Yeah, because honestly, I would assume that regardless of who places first in this current generation, even though we know it's gonna be Switch, is the other companies are still definitely hitting profit. 100%. Microsoft and Sony are fine.
Yeah. They wouldn't keep doing it if they weren't making tons of money in this space, right?
Especially because Microsoft and Sony also have alternative income in non-gaming areas, which makes it even more for them, which is why we all want Nintendo to win, so they stick around because they're only Nintendo.
You know who the sleeper winner is, though, here?
Who's the sleeper? Tell me.
Apple. Do you know why?
Oh.
Do you know Apple makes more money off of gaming than Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo combined?
Oh, here it comes. I love these takes, Tyler. I love these takes. I love it when Tyler starts talking about Apple. They take their 30% cut in the App Store of all those mobile games that are doing microtransactions and stuff, and they make way more. I used to say, I still say this, I think Apple should get into console gaming, and I've talked about this a lot, but they don't have to. They make so much more money off of gaming than the gaming companies make off of gaming that they don't even have to. They can just continue raking it in. That's right.
We'll see how this lawsuit stuff turns out for them. They're already going to have to open the iPhone up in South Korea, I think, and that might kind of open the floodgates. They may not be able to hold on to that monopoly for much longer. And
every time your aunt buys time off of her Candy Crush, there's just a cha-ching noise, cash register noise that goes off at the Apple headquarters.
That's
every
right.
time.
Tim
they just
Apple
roll in the dough.
Just rolling in it. Yep.
Yeah, I really want to see what happens. This is kind of history right now with them owning everything, and the whole Epic store, and not Epic store, but Epic, and everything on there, and how they're dealing with the currency problems they have.
Yeah,
because this is going to change the future for sure with how people run free to play.
Yep. And my my hot take is I hope Apple loses these lawsuits. I hope they have to open the iPhone up to other payment systems and other app stores. That's what I hope for because I think that's better competition.
That's a hot take because Tyler loves Apple. I know
Big, huge
as
Apple
his
fan.
friend. He is a huge Apple fan, and he's betraying them right now. You know, that might be the hottest take on this podcast because it's a personally hot take.
Personal hot take. Well, and it also shows you that I don't
be like super cold.
Yeah. It also shows you that I'm not a blind Apple lover who just loves everything indiscriminately. I have my qualms, and I think they make a lot of good products. I think in this area, they're wrong. Anyway, that's a digression. A little bit of current history. We'll be able to look back on this episode in 10 years and say,
that's right.
He got it right, or wow, got it super wrong.
Be like, remember when we did that episode 178 and we talked about Apple? We'll be there.
Yep. But in 2003, though, Nintendo would see a real competitor in the handheld space, or at least we would hear the rumblings of a real competitor in the handheld space. Finally, Ken Kutaragi announced the PSP, the PlayStation Portable, at E3 in 2003. And so Nintendo also had to get on making a new device because the Game Boy Advance had been out for a couple of years, and anything Sony was going to put out now was going to blow it out of the water. So they needed to clap back with something. This was also the first year that Nintendo had actual losses. So we did all that thing with like, yeah, you can be in third place and make tons of money. That is true a lot of the time. In 2003, that was not true. Nintendo did actually lose money that year. Or at least one of the quarters that year they lost money. So
yeah, I mean, also the market is probably smaller back then too.
Yep.
So like they don't have like, I mean, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo all have dedicated fan bases that will always buy their stuff now. Where I think back then there wasn't as much fever around it. You know, this is definitely speculating, but that's probably the case. I feel like.
Yeah. And I think that they were probably going pretty ham on some R&D stuff, especially with the GameCube not doing as well as they'd hoped. They're probably sinking a lot of money into what's next.
The Virtual Boy 2.
The Virtual Boy 2. Yep. So Nintendo chairman Hiroshi Yamauchi was pretty salty at this point in time, and he had some choice words to say about Microsoft. He said, "There are many people in this industry that know nothing about games. And if you ask me, sounds like he's mad because he was bad. He was just real salty. You mad because you bad, right?
This is a get good moment.
Yeah, get good. This is where he solidified the strategy of using older hardware in creative ways rather than joining the spec measuring contest. Because Nintendo had tried to compete on specs throughout its whole life, at least on consoles, not so much with the Game Boy. But even up to the GameCube, they were like trying to be a powerful device. It was comparable to the PS2 and the Xbox in terms of specs. There were, advantages and disadvantages to every one of these machines, but they were directly trying to compete with hardware. It didn't work for them. They had done it with the Super Nintendo. They'd done it with the Nintendo 64, and now they were doing it with the GameCube, and they were over it. Yamauchi was over trying to compete on specs, and so he was like, we're just going to leave this measuring contest for the other two. We are going to make good games on good, cheap, proven hardware. And then they introduced the DS, which they said stood for Developer System. We all knew what the DS stood for. Dual screens, come on.
Dual screens. Still so mad I sold my DS in games. Still very mad at Mike from that time period. Super
Rest
upset.
in peace.
Yeah, that was my one nostalgic piece of DS.
I do still love my DS Lite. That's one of my favorite handhelds of all time. Is that DS Lite because it had the good backlight and it was like small and compact. Still played Game Boy Advance games.
Yeah, they would fit in your pocket just so perfectly.
Yep.
Oh,
I played that thing in high school a lot.
If they put phone functionality on a DS, it would have been no contest for me.
Yeah,
even if it would have been awkward, I would have used it as a kid because I would have felt like I was cool.
Same. Yeah. Matt in Japan and I played a lot of DS games backstage during theater productions in high school. A lot of DS games.
Just jealous of Matt in Japan for knowing you back then. So
we had a lot of fun. So they'd done multi-screen games before in the past. This was the first time that Nintendo did multi-screen games. The PlayChoice 10 systems had some competitive aspects to them where players would play on different screens sort of against each other. And then they had those Game & Watch LCD systems in the early 80s. Some of them had 2 screens. So this wasn't new for them, but it was pretty new. This was almost 20 years later. I don't know if they were going to use a lot of the learnings from those systems. But they were introducing this concept to gamers now in the future.
Also, childhood me blown away by this.
Yeah.
Completely blown away. What? What is this? 2 screens?
It's one of the things that, as a kid, when you're, trying to imagine, what could the future possibly be? These graphics are so realistic, there's no way they'll ever get any better. What could the next Game Boy be? Dude, what if you had 2 screens? What if you had 2 Game Boy screens, you could play 2 games at once? Like, that's the kind of stuff that we would dream about, right?
For me, I was like, I can just look at my Pokemon's roster at the bottom screen while I'm walking around the top screen. This is like, I can get so much done. It was like, I got excited about multitasking, but doing it for video games and not
video game productivity.
Work. Yep, exactly. Video game productivity. It was perfect.
Funny enough, around this time is when the technology for the 3DS screen started to kind of become useful. Nintendo actually had a few developers working on games for a 3D screen that they were like toying around with for the GameCube. That ultimately didn't really pan out. I think maybe the technology was too expensive, but like that passive 3D where you didn't need glasses or anything, looking at the 3DS screen, that existed for several years before the 3DS came out in 2010. So I think that's a pretty cool little tidbit.
Little tidbit. I love it.
Yeah. So, back in 2003, Sony had announced the PSP and Nintendo needed to answer. They knew Sony could compete, and they knew that there were a few other systems around this time kind of vying for the public's gaming hours as well. We had the N-Gage that you talked about. We had the Palm OS-based Tapwave Zodiac, which I was actually kind of excited for because I loved Palm OS-based things. And there was some kind of new Microsoft handheld that was like sort of rumored to be in the works as well. This is speculation, but I am assuming that that handheld went on to become what is now known as the Zune. Do you remember the Zune?
Oh, do I remember the Zune?
Did you have a Zune?
Friend? I don't have a Zune, but I had multiple friends that had Zunes, and I would always put my iPod up next to theirs, and we'd talk about it and compare them. Mm-hmm. And there was definitely like a silly fanboy flame war at my high school about who had a Zune and who had an iPhone. And iPod, and I was all iPod because I had like the 60 gig with video.
Yeah.
And I was like, look at this. Your Zune can't do this. And I was just like, and now the Zune's the butt of everyone's joke.
I know. It's too bad because the Zune really
was.
It really did. Like, it had a big screen. It was like color. It did a lot of cool stuff. Like, this is, I don't know exactly the timeline is of when the Zune came out, but I think Apple had to sort of compete with the Zune, and that's why they put out the video iPod.
I have a memory, and you can tell me if I'm correct here or not, or if I'm just making this up. You could play games like Brick Breaker on those iPods.
Yeah, it did have a few little games. There's like a solitaire game. There was the Brick Breaker game.
Yeah, I played Brick Breaker a lot on my iPod, actually, now that I think about it. Because I was like, what, there's a game on here? And I just started playing that all the time.
I loved the music quiz game, too, where it would play like a random 20-second snippet of a song, and you have to guess which song it was on your iPod.
Yeah.
It was great because it used your music.
Yeah, that was really cool. But yeah, I mean, the Zune, I remember the Zune very fondly. I actually kind of wish I got a Zune because it's so like counterculture-y now.
You could share songs over Wi-Fi too with your friends.
Oh,
I think there was like some weird restriction of like, here, you can have the song for free for 24 hours or something.
And
but it's still cool.
If I remember correctly, the Zune was like native. It was MP3 formatting, right? It wasn't like the Apple's weird like you had to use iTunes stuff.
I think you had to use Windows Media Player, so it was like MP3s and like WMAs.
I thought you could just drag and drop that on. That was great.
Yeah, you may have been able to. It might have been a little bit more drag and drop than the iPod was.
Because I would think with Windows, it would just go more with Windows File Explorer. You just plug your Zune in and drag and drop things on. But I still loathe iTunes. Like, that might be the thing that Apple has made that makes me mad that I still think about is iTunes as like a program. I hate it.
Oh, I never had an issue with iTunes. Never really had a problem with it.
I think it might have been me trying to use it on a computer that was wrong, but still.
That's true. iTunes on PC was always pretty bad.
That was it. That was why. But yeah, it would slow everything down.
Yeah, it was a little bit
upset.
A little bit worse there. But yeah. Kent goes on to talk about the Zodiac a little bit. Had some positive buzz at first. Had great specs, had a touchscreen, and the tech magazines loved it because it was also just straight up a Palm OS PDA, which was pretty cool. The screen was bigger than the GBA. It was a little bit more powerful than the GBA. I watched a video of somebody playing Tony Hawk 4 on it, and it kind of reminds me of the GBA version of Tony Hawk 4. I played a lot of Tony Hawk 2 on my Game Boy Advance, man. Whew, so much Tony Hawk 2. That was a really good portable version of it.
I never played Tony Hawk on a portable before.
Yeah, it was like it had a cool isometric view. It was like Tony Hawk, but Diablo viewpoint, you know? And it worked. I really
went out there with portable games in what I bought and tried to see if it would work. Like, I would take risks when I would buy Game Boy games, and we could talk about that some episode, I think, because I played some weird ones.
I would love to hear your weirdest handheld games.
Which was
I remember that game.
Yeah, I bought that.
I just remember it being talked about in Nintendo Power.
I tried to get into it. It was very difficult. We'll talk about it in another episode.
Yeah, they had Duke Nukem on it too. Did not run like a slideshow. I found a video of that. Ran pretty well. I don't think it also had 2 cartridge slots too, which is like, I wonder who made that decision of like, yeah, but we got 1 cartridge slot, but like, what if we had 2 cartridge slots though? What if we had 2 games at a time?
They saw the N-Gage. They're like, we're going to raise you, taking out the battery and the cover, and we're going to put 2 game slots on there and just laugh in your face.
Yeah. Then you'll never, if you only own 2 games, you'll never have to change your games out.
You'll never have to change your games out because you only need 2 games.
Yeah.
Right?
Only need 2 games. But the problem was the Zodiac did not have very many games, and the battery life was pretty bad.
They put 2 game slots on there because there were only 2 games to play.
Yeah.
You don't need any more slots.
This is it. We have 2 games, so you can play them both. It kind of felt like an unfocused device too. It was like, was this a PDA? Was it a gaming device? I think the PSP could have fallen into that trap, except it was very clearly a gaming first device. I think they really did a good job advertising it. And Sony had way bigger advertising budget too. But Zodiac just had no games, you know? I was looking at the list of exclusives for it, and I recognized 0 of them. Literally none. It did have some cool ports. Like I said, it had Tony Hawk, it had Doom, it had Duke Nukem, it had some games that were available elsewhere, but nothing that you could only get on the Zodiac. And so it kind of really only appealed to people who wanted to play games but also needed a PDA, which at the time when portable games were much more marketed towards kids, I don't think kids had much use for PDA, although middle school Tyler definitely used his PDA a lot because...
Are you doing some calendar stuff?
I wish I had enough things going on in my life then to use the calendar. I did not, but I loved my PDA anyway.
Did you write the classes you had in high school in there every day anyway, even though you always remember? You just had them in there?
Yep. And I had like friends' phone numbers that are still in like that through various syncing mechanisms. Like people would put their phone number in my PDA in like 2003, and then I would sync it to my computer. And then when I got a cell phone, I was like, oh, I already had all these contacts on my computer. I'll sync it to my cell phone. And then I got an iPhone, and it's like that had a syncing thing. And so I have people's phone numbers, like whatever their phone number was in 2003, and I haven't talked to them since they put their phone number in my Palm OS Visor Edge. I still have their phone number because it just kept syncing over.
Me too. I have all those phone numbers from like high school. Someone just had to have made something like a bot that goes, or an app on your phone that will be like, okay, who have you not called in 5 years? Let's just delete this number out of your contact.
Get that number out of there. Yeah. Or like an archive, right? Of like, here are the numbers.
You haven't called them in.
Because it seems silly to delete numbers because like they don't take up space, right? But
that's true.
The problem is that they get clutter, and when you're scrolling through your contacts list, you have just a bunch of things that you don't need. And so like I want some AI to like figure out, okay, these are the numbers you actually need to see when you're scrolling through, and these are the numbers that like we're gonna make you search for them if you somehow need somebody's number that they gave you in 2003.
I'm so bad at organizing my phone numbers. Like I have like 4 entries of the same person with different numbers, you know, like because they change and you're like, oh, I'll just update it without actually doing it because you're at a bar or something. And you have no time.
Yeah. Because you don't have time to like actually do it properly. And so you just make a brand new. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to Codex, a history of contact histories.
Oh man. I love Palm OS devices though. And that one seems like a cool one with a really specific niche that I kind of want to get one and just see how it is.
I don't want to, you know, you're one of my bestest friends, but you saying the sentence, I love Palm OS devices, might be one of the nerdiest things I've ever heard. And I love it. I love it so much because I've never met someone who's like, yeah, Nintendo, Sony, Xbox, but I'm really niche about Palm OS. That's your thing.
Love Palm OS, and I loved like the early Windows Mobile too, like Windows Mobile 2002, 2003. I had a Dell Pocket PC that I upgraded. That's what I upgraded from my Palm OS to a Pocket PC, and that was really cool.
Dude, we're gonna get
that one played MP3s.
Made.
It was great.
# Team Palm OS. That's what we're gonna get T-shirts that say, and you just sell them.
There were a lot of good games. You know, Mafia Wars and the like that line of games now kind of started out on Palm OS. Well, maybe it didn't start out there, but there was like Dope Wars on Palm OS that people would play, and maybe that started before on like TI-83 calculators too. Like I feel like every game system has some form of Dope Wars. Like every game system that like random people could make games for, you know, always had like a version of Dope Wars. Have you ever played that?
Yeah. I think I played. I think I played the Mafia Wars one. That's kind of like a spin-offy kind of thing. Yeah, I played Mafia Wars for sure, but I never played Dope Wars.
Yeah, it's kind of all the same thing.
There was a while where I would like just download games off of the Apple Store, even though they were like freemium stuff, and I would just play them until the timers got absurd and then uninstall them. You know, it's like a time killer in school. So, but yeah, I think I definitely played that then.
Yeah.
But yeah, hashtag Palm OS for life.
So let's get back to the DS in 2004. Nintendo revealed it in 2004. It was pretty weird, but it was from Nintendo. So like everybody knew it was going to get games, right? They knew they were going to get their Marios and their Zeldas and their Donkey Kongs. Like anything Nintendo puts out, you can kind of be reasonably sure this thing's going to get games. Even the Wii U, which was not successful, had games. There's a lot of great Wii U games, and they're all on the Switch now. I think almost every single good Wii U game that's worth getting a Wii U for is all on Switch now, which is great.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I mean, you know what? I'm doing it. I'm playing them because I'm so happy they're on there. It's for me. Nintendo did it for me.
Yep, this is all for you, Mike.
Thank you, Nintendo.
Yeah.
Sorry what I said earlier about you not changing your technology or sounding like a curmudgeon-y old person when it came to new technology with the PSP. I take it all back.
Sony also showed off the PSP at E3 in 2004 to regular consumers at this point. So like we have dueling portable devices here. This is total all-out war. I got a quote here from Kaz Hirai in the book. He says, the proliferation of mobile devices is at an all-time high, and in fact, many of us carry around more than one mobile device. Today, the worldwide market for mobile devices, whether it be cell phones, digital music devices, productivity tools, or gaming machines, is more than 1.4 billion units worldwide. PlayStation Portable will enter an already crowded space, but one with many growth opportunities. Which is like basically what I get out of this quote is that Sony was starting to see where the market was headed. As consumers start to carry around more devices, it becomes valuable to them for them to be able to combine those devices, because when you're walking around, you don't have space, right? I had cargo pants, so I could hold 6 or 7 different devices, but I was not cool or popular in high school. So,
wait. Are you saying cargo pants didn't mean popular? Because in that case, I wasn't cool, and I feel like I was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I would go shorts, because you got to have the aerodynamics.
Yeah, cargo pants were, I did specifically wear cargo pants because I could carry my wallet and I could carry my PDA, whatever PDA I was using at the time. I didn't have a cell phone. Well, I did eventually get a cell phone, so I was also carrying that around. I would carry around my DS. I would carry around sometimes a CD player. I never had a standalone MP3 player because I think by the time MP3 players became a real thing, I was either listening on my PDA or I had gotten an iPod. So but I would also carry around an iPod, right?
Yeah, your wallet, your phone, your keys, your iPod. I'd have my DS. I'd have, and then I'd also have antacids in one of the pockets. It's
That's
important to always carry those with you. You got to have Tums on you in case you get a crummy tummy. It's important when you're playing your game.
You got it, just in case you get the crummy tummy.
You never let crummy tummy stop your game.
Yeah. So if you could combine your game player, your video viewer, your music player, all those stuff into one device, toss some Wi-Fi on that bad boy, baby, you got a portable stew going. It had a huge, beautiful screen. It was perfect for gaming, watching movies on, had really good audio quality as well. Like for the time, like when you plugged headphones in, it sounded pretty good. And speakers were, There were later firmware updates that would introduce a web browser. So this thing was like trying to be your phone before phones could do this stuff. And it was actually good. And it was from Sony, so it had games. There were a lot of good games on the PSP that were worth playing. It was a little expensive compared to offerings from Nintendo. The PSP was $249, and the DS was $100 cheaper at $149. So, but compared to other systems that had come before that were trying to do it all, like this was a steal. It was a good deal, and it did all of those things, and it did them well. The only thing it didn't do was a cell phone, which is the only thing the N-Gage got right, was that it was like the thing that N-Gage got right was that they had called their shot that the phone was going to be the center of all these things. I think they just came a little too early. Like the tech just wasn't really there. Phones weren't as ubiquitous. Like in 2003, 2004, like nowadays, if somebody doesn't have a phone, you're like, whoa, that's a choice you made, right? Like that's a thing somebody did on purpose. In 2003, 2004, if you didn't have a phone, that's fine. Like it wasn't weird. Like lots of people had them, but it wasn't weird to not have one, especially if you were a kid, right?
Yeah, I remember being very apprehensive to get rid of my flip phone for a smartphone. Like my brother gave me his old iPhone as like a hand-me-down, and I was very much like, I don't know if I'm really going to use it. And then I did some games on it on the internet over like a holiday break, and I was like, I'm sold, But I had that sort of so now if you meet someone that doesn't want a phone, they'll give you a flip phone for free, or even a smartphone for free to get a plan.
I don't even think they really make flip phones anymore, except for a niche. Like, I think you have to pay money for a flip phone because nobody wants one. But they got
That's
Android
funny.
phones they'll hand out. They give away for free.
Yeah, that's funny. That means I'm basing this off of like 3 or 4 years ago when I saw a flip phone in a store it said free with plan. So yeah, you're probably right. It's probably like a smartphone for free with
you
an
get
Android
a flip phone when you like purposely want a flip phone because you want, like, you are making the conscious decision that you want a phone that doesn't do all of those things, which actually ironically ends up costing you a little bit more money because not many people want those.
Yeah, and you had to use T9 again, which is fun for everybody.
Yeah. So anyway, the N-Gage, like, it had the phone thing, but like it had an extra fee associated with it because it could like go online and do data stuff. So it was like, not only did you need to convince somebody that they needed a phone, which was a hard thing to do if somebody didn't want a phone. It was hard to convince them they needed one because of the monthly plan, and it was going to be extra if you were doing it on the N-Gage, probably for like a data plan that was going to be slow and bad anyway. So they were just a few years too early. And like having internet on your phone, people would be like, why would you need that? Why would you want internet on your phone? That's so dumb. Which is funny to hear now.
Googled everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember, this is another side tangent, but in the days like where smartphones were like starting to pick up a little bit, not everybody had one because they didn't want to pay the extra monthly fee and because smartphones were expensive, but there was like, people could sort of tell that maybe having the world's information in your pocket was like actually pretty cool. And there were text message services where you would text a real person that worked somewhere and ask them a question, and they would basically Google it for you and send you the message, like send you the answer back in text message. Did you ever do that? I wish I could remember what that service was called.
I never did it, but I remember other people doing this for questions that I had.
Yeah.
And we had as like a group, and that I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, that was that like that's this like weird like in between moment of like, oh gosh, was Reese Witherspoon in Sweet Home Alabama? And you would like text that to this number, and then like a minute or two later, you get a text back. It's like, yeah, Reese Witherspoon was in Sweet Home Alabama, and you'd be like, sweet, I knew it, and like
thank you, text service.
Yeah, and then they would text you an ad after that or something to pay for it, but
for Sweet Home Alabama,
right?
By the movie.
Now that you know Reese Witherspoon is in it, you definitely want to watch that movie.
And I believe it was Reese Witherspoon texting you back too, saying, like, was me. That was me.
That was the cool part, is that specifically Reese Witherspoon worked in this. I don't think other celebrities did, but she specifically worked on this.
Every time you texted a question, it was Reese Witherspoon on a computer just waiting for you to Google it. She wanted to Google it for you.
So nice of her.
So kind.
So anyway, Nintendo knew they were on the back foot a little bit and they wouldn't be able to compete on specs. So what they did was they sold an idea, not a product. And Kent quotes friend of the podcast, Reggie Fils-Aimé, saying, I like to think of it like buying a car. Admit it, your left brain looks at the vehicle in terms of numbers. What's the horsepower, the towing capacity, the 0 to 60? That's our competitor's approach. But your right brain is different. There's only one question out there. Sitting behind the wheel, where will this baby take me? In other words, do you want to go just a little bit faster down the same streets you've always driven, or down a new road to places you've never been before? That's the difference with the DS, which is a really good corporate like marketing speak right there, right? Of this like,
that's
you don't
a salesman.
need numbers, you don't need all this other stuff. You know what you need? You just need great games. And the thing is it's like corporate marketing speak, but he's also right, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it really is what you're looking for. Like the thing for me, I remember this moment of like DS or PSP for me, because I was a Game Boy person. That price point really set it apart for me. Like,
yeah, that makes a big difference too.
I was paying $100 less, but I knew it was Nintendo. So like that just sells it for me as like a teenager at this time. That's what I want. But if you're also like, there were people then that loved new tech. And in that case, the PSP was I don't think he's right. I think he's making a good argument for his side. Yeah. Because that sounds so that is such a good salesman pitch.
Right.
It's so good. But I also am like, yeah, but you also want to know that the thing that you're buying is like the car is going to take you there over time,
Yeah.
Like that would be my response to that. But
well, and
it's really good.
He frames it a little bit like as a false dichotomy too. It's not like the car with the better specs can't take you to new places,
Yeah,
in fact,
that's
it can,
true.
and it can get you there faster. So, like, ultimately, he's wrong on that particular analogy. But
the car will let you watch Sweet Home Alabama on UMD.
Oh, that movie came out on UMD. That would have been like the perfect time. I'm Googling it right now.
Did.
Sweet Home Alabama
Someone
UMD.
had to watch it on UMD.
eBay. I'm going to see how much a UMD of Sweet Home Alabama costs on eBay.
That movie was a banger when it came out.
I really liked that movie.
I was a fan. Yeah, it was a good movie.
Oh, maybe there isn't a UMD of it.
Is that?
eBay doesn't have one.
Movie's good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, UMDs are much like have gone the way of the HD DVD after them. Sure.
Yeah.
Hard to find.
I don't think it had a UMD version. That's too bad. Maybe it was a little bit too
sorry,
early for
Reese.
that.
We're sorry. Listener of the podcast, Reese Witherspoon, is very disappointed.
Yeah.
She's going to send us an angry email.
Yeah. Send us an email, Reese. So that quote, though, I do still like it. I'm
not dogging it at all. I think it's a good quote. I definitely just I think it's very salesy.
Yeah, I agree. Kent also notes it's kind of ironic and hollow coming from Nintendo. This is the company that says New Streets and then sells you Star Fox and Mario Kart again. So,
Yep. We should just wait. I could just wait for Kent to do it. He's got it. We'll have him back on again. He'll replace me.
Yeah. We'll get him on here. But the DS also had another ace in the hole here. It had full backward compatibility with Game Boy Advance games, which was pretty nuts when you think about it, because they just straight up included a whole cartridge slot to put your Game Boy Advance games in. Like, they didn't have to do that. Nobody was asking for that, but they still did.
I loved this because I still had GB. I still have a Game Boy Advance copy of Super Mario World.
Yeah.
That was I bought for my DS because I knew I could play it on my DS.
Yeah. The GBA slot did kind of work as an accessory port for some games too. My most famous of which, anyway, the one that sticks out to me the most is the version of Guitar Hero that came out for the DS.
That was cool with the little buttons.
Yeah. So it would
really cool.
Clamp into the GBA slot and give you Guitar Hero buttons, and you would strum the guitar with the touchscreen. It was kind of cool. This is a version of Guitar Hero that Matt in Japan and I affectionately refer to as Hand Cramp Hero because of how not great those controls were. And I say that with him because he bought the game. He really took one for the team because the rest of us were able to realize that just wasn't it. That was not the way to play Guitar Hero. So thanks for buying that game in 2007 or whatever, Matt, because...
Thank you. Yeah, I love the term Hand Cramp Hero. It works so well to describe it.
Not great. It hurt pretty bad to play that game for longer than a few minutes.
Props to Matt for jumping on that friendship grenade and buying that game so you all could try it and be like, well, this is a big old glass of Nope. My bad.
Yeah, and it was more expensive too, probably, than a regular DS game because it came with a little accessory. So, yeah. Got to spend that Wendy's money.
I hope we talk about, because we're going to cover Guitar Hero and Rock Band eventually. We have to, because that's a very formative time for gaming for me. And I know you too, Tyler.
Yeah,
you played a lot of Rock Band and Guitar Hero. And we need to cover this version because, Hand Cramp Hero. That's a great name. I don't know why it cracked me up so much. Oh, I know. It's very funny.
The version of that game that came out for the PSP, or I guess the Rock Band on the PSP. I don't know if Guitar Hero ever had a PSP version, but Rock Band on PSP was very fun. Actually, really good version of that because they didn't try to recreate playing an instrument with it. It was just basically if you ever played Frequency or Amplitude on the PS2, those were games made by Harmonix before they made Guitar Hero and Rock Band. The PSP version of Rock Band called Rock Band Unplugged was basically like that, and it was actually really cool. But it didn't come out until way later. That's another aside.
Would you just use the XO triangle square buttons?
See, and you would switch between instruments. So you would play one for a little bit, and once you nailed the combo for a certain number in a row, it would that instrument was now playing for a while, and you would switch to another instrument. And the idea was that you would never have instruments not playing because you would be able to hop around the board fast enough to keep them all playing, which was really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
So anyway, the DS had Wi-Fi for online connectivity. It had, and also for wireless linking with other devices, a fact which Pokemon fans around the world rejoiced in. Plus Pictochat. Do you remember Pictochat?
Vaguely. I know that in term, but I don't remember exactly what it does. I never really had friends that had DSs, so I never really did a lot of the connective, that's the saddest sentence I've ever said. But I mean... Yeah, but I didn't mean I had a great time with my DS, but I never used this feature. But I remember the term Pictochat.
Yeah. Well, it was built into every DS. If you fired up your DS without a game in it, Pictochat was one of the options that you could do. And it would just basically you could connect to chat rooms that would be full of people nearby with their DSs. And you could draw and you could type. And it was pretty cool. And it was a lot of fun.
Street Pass? This is kind of early Street Pass stuff,
right? Similar kind of built-in thing. And I think you could probably do something similar with the Street Pass app maybe. But it was a lot of fun to do at conventions like PAX because there'd be so many people there with DSs that would all be in the chat rooms and then they would just draw horrible things on the screen. And but it was still a lot of
classic.
Fun, Yep.
For the longest time, there was the Nintendo was a sponsor of the Seattle Mariners for a very, I mean, not a sponsor, an owner of the Seattle Mariners.
Yeah.
So for the longest time, they actually would have like a lot of Nintendo 3DS stuff at the stadium, and especially Pokemon Go, and that came out, they had a lot of stuff there, and it was really cool because that was the only time you could use these features. Like for me, it was the only time I'd use these, and it was great though. It was like you'd have people battling in Pokemon raids for Pokemon Go, and then have people trading Pokemon on their DSs. It was really cool.
Yeah, that is cool. I wish I got into a Mariners game with a 3DS. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. I'm not gonna lie, I was a big fan of it. I never really again, I got rid of my DS before that, but I definitely did Pokemon Go stuff.
Nice.
At the Mariners games.
Nice. Well, the DS, in its crazy way, did it. It had games. And so did the PSP. Like, don't get me wrong, PSP had lots of great games, which we actually covered back in the early 50s of our episodes. I went back to see if we had talked about PSP. We did. But I think the president of Squaresoft nails it. Yoichi Wada said, people are not looking for the handheld version of their console games. Nintendo understands this. And I think that's why the DS ended up outselling the PSP by a factor of 2x. Like, it sold double the amount of PSPs. Some people wanted a portable PS2 that could play movies and music, and that's kind of what the PSP was. But most people just wanted a game player. And also, it was $100 cheaper. And that makes it a pretty big difference, too. But games that are designed for the DS tend to be designed with more portability in mind. They're like shorter play sessions, that kind of stuff. The PSP it definitely felt more like a handheld console. And Hideo Kojima kind of compares it to food, saying that handhelds shouldn't just be fancy food carried around in fast food containers. They should be their own thing, taking advantage of the fact that they're fast food. And I will extend that analogy to say that they're like Jack in the Box tacos. Can you get better tacos at another place? Yes, absolutely. But can you get Jack in the Box tacos at another place? You cannot. And sometimes I just want Jack in the Box tacos. I don't want tacos from anywhere else.
I really want Jack in the Box tacos now.
They're so good. Not because they're good tacos. They're not. But they are good tacos,
They're also $2 for $1.
Yeah.
I believe, which is fantastic.
And they've been $2 for $1 for like 20 years.
They're like the Costco hot dog $1.50 deal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a good analogy, Tyler.
Handhelds weren't the only thing happening at E3 in 2004. You know what games came out in 2004 off the top of your head, Mike?
No, not off the top of my head. I'm really bad with dates and games and remembering the dates connected to the games.
There was a picture up on Reddit like yesterday or something about this that like showed all of the great games that came out in 2004. And man, that year was stacked. Off the top of my head, you got Half-Life 2. You got Far Cry, the original. You got World of Warcraft. You got Jak and Daxter 3, Ratchet and Clank 3, among others. There were lots of great games came out in 2004. That's the point. Dude, of what I'm saying. And that's what we're going to get to in the next episode. That's all segue into the next episode. But Mike, what you been playing this week?
Done. Oh, I've been playing a lot of cool stuff. I have one more thought on Sony, because this book is teaching me is I've been pretty much an Xbox fanboy ever since the Xbox came out. Mm-hmm. But Sony really been like the forefront of gaming technology for a very long time.
Yeah.
And which I think is something that I don't respect enough, which is why this whole chapter on the PSP is cool, because you see like Nintendo had their direction and Sony had theirs. And while Sony technically lost with sales, like the PSP is a great moment in gaming. Mm-hmm. I think for so many memories for people too. Like I had a lot of friends with PSPs that are like, yeah, it's the best just to play Final Fantasy or whatever on the PSP. It's fantastic. So I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But anyway, that was my quick aside. But I have been playing more Skyward Sword. Beat that giant tentacle monster on the sand ship. Very spooky, but I did a good job cutting its tentacles off. It felt kind of bad, but then I didn't because it was scary. And I had to hit it in the eye, which is just classic Zelda.
Yep.
Also, I do this. I don't know if you do this, Tyler. When a new game comes out in a series, I get so hyped that instead of buying the new game, I start playing the old version.
Yeah, I've done that before.
The game is Jurassic World Evolution. The second one came out this week. Had no idea it was coming out, but I was a huge fan of the first game. So I spent like 6 hours yesterday playing this game, Jurassic World Evolution 1, and just fixing up the islands I had and like doing the missions because, and this is a big flaw with the game, there's no time fast forward or pause on the early Jurassic World Evolution. It's a big problem because the games take way too long because of this, and which is why I spent 6 hours. But That's what I do now. I like get hyped for the new game, but I just play the old one to get that hype feeling away without paying any money. Is what I'm doing.
And then if you're still into it after playing the old one for a little while, then maybe you pick up the new one.
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm going to do. I got this one of the games with gold, so I'm just playing it for free on Xbox. So I'm like, yeah, this is super fun for me. I love this game. I'm not buying any DLC. I'm just playing the islands because I just love Jurassic Park so much. And it's perfect for me, and I am having a really fun time. And I'm also kind of had been stumbling through the game, getting 5 stars, not realizing I needed to do missions to get cool buildings. So yesterday I just unlocked a bunch of cool new buildings and like park upgrades and stuff. And I love a good park sim. So I was really, and I love dinosaurs more. So that's really what it is for me. Because I know as a park sim, it's not considered very good because it has missing a lot of features that park sims have, like pause and fast forward, and also like more in-depth management controls. But big fan. What have you been playing?
I'm still just on Destiny. All my free time has just been on Destiny. I'm incredibly boring right now.
I don't think it's boring. I love getting Destiny texts from you because you're telling me you're like, oh, I just got this weapon. I'm getting this catalyst. And I'm like, okay, Tyler's back into it. He's like my number one. He's the man on the street, you know, when I need a question about Destiny because you're paying more attention right now than I am. And
I'm getting real deep in the weeds on like different builds and stuff because of all the new armor stuff that they've added in the time that we've been gone, like the Warmind cell stuff and like all the charged with light stuff. Like before when I was playing, I was like, I'm not really sure what this is. I'm sure there's something I'm missing here. That's fine. Now I'm like getting into it. I'm like, okay, how can I like change my playstyle? And I'm starting to see very different, like, okay, if I use this gun and then this exotic and then I have these mods in here, then it's going to be super fun. And we're going to shoot these explodey ball things and we're all going to get healed when we shoot the explodey ball things. Like, I don't know, I've been having a lot of fun with that stuff. And that's stuff that they've added to the game that didn't exist when it first came out too. So if you haven't played in a while, it's cool.
I was going to say, I've been playing Destiny since Destiny 1 launched, and I never cared about builds until I started playing again with you this year. And I never even thought about it, but what my build was. I just picked the guns I wanted to play with, or if there was a meta gun, that was the only thing I thought of. Like, what gun do I need here? I'll put that on. And that was all I changed. I never messed with resilience or discipline, or I never messed with that stuff. And now it's like a whole new game for me because we are caring about that stuff, which is fun. And we're playing that content that demands it, which is another thing another reason I didn't. Is because I never really got to play these fun raids. We're getting really good at Deep Stone Crypt.
We are getting really good at Deep Stone Crypt. We could run that thing in under an hour now, I bet, with the crew.
So fun and so rad. But that's great. You playing anything else or just like all Destiny all the time?
That's kind of it. Just all Destiny all the time. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's really anything else. That's what I play. I haven't had a whole lot of time for games the last week. So like when I do, that's what I'm playing. And yeah, I play something else and I'm just like, I could be playing at Destiny though. Cause I have goals now. I have these big goals of like what I'm kind of grinding for and like what I want. There's always, a carrot being dangled in front of me. And I'm like, I want to spend time getting this thing. So
yeah, see, I'm trying to really beat Zelda Skyward Sword HD because I have some other Nintendo games I would like to purchase. And I want to play the games I've purchased first. And I gotta
get back on Metroid. I stopped playing Metroid and I love it. It's a great game. And I just haven't.
That's a big one for me right now. Yeah, Metroid. I also I know people say Pokemon Sword and Shield is easy, and that's kind of why I want to do it, because I want to just blow through a Pokemon game. I'm in the mood, to just like sit down and really wreck a Pokemon game. So it's kind of what my thought is. But right now we got some emails to read.
All right.
This first one is from Durin. Hey guys, I discovered your podcast a little over a year ago, and I have been a fan since. In your most recent episode talking about arcades, you guys mentioned having a nostalgia for a time you never really experienced. I was born in the late 90s, and recently I've been realizing so much of my interest in hobbies revolve around this concept of nostalgia for a time I never lived through. Most of my favorite movies and music all came from the 70s and 80s. My favorite gaming consoles include the Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64. Within the past year, I started collecting VHS tapes that I find at thrift stores and on eBay. Finally, of course, I love learning about the history of video games, and a big thanks to you guys for that. Some of my older peers and family members think my interest in, quote, retro technology is funny because they lived through it and have seen technology evolve. For me, though, it's like discovering a whole new world that I'm fully in love with. So I definitely understand this nostalgia for a time I never saw. I understand you guys are busy and probably have a million episodes on the back burner. However, I would like to share something I would be really interested to learn about: the history of video game adaptations of movies. I remember when I was younger seeing so many video games releasing alongside the movies of the same title. I know this has been going on since the Atari days, giving us some like the infamous E.T. to more presently the B-movie, The Game, and in parentheses it says masterpiece. Anyway, jokes aside, I would love to see something along those lines, but I am excited for any and all new content you release. I'm going to stop reading right here because there is a big chapter at the very end of the Ultimate History of Video Games Volume 2 that covers this, and we're going to talk about it. It talks about video game adaptations into movies and movie adaptations into video games. So I think we're going to scratch that itch, Durin. So we'll cover it there. And then there's also some franchises that I want to talk about, like Ghostbusters and Jurassic Park and like the childhood movies I love. And also those early Disney SNES games that I love dearly, like Aladdin, you know.
Great game.
Great game. So we'll talk about those for sure. But that's definitely on the burner. So don't even worry about it. But sorry this was so long-winded. I guess a little nervous. Oh, excuse me. Sorry this was so long-winded. I'm speaking as Durin again. I guess I get a little nervous when typing emails to my personal celebrities. That's very nice of you to say, but not true. However, I love your podcast, and it makes work go by so much faster for me, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have in store. Also, if you're in the Dallas area, check out the free play arcades around the town. Highly recommend them. Thanks again, Durin. Thank you, Durin. You know how hard it was for me to not attempt a very terrible Durin Oakenshield impression during that entire thing? I could just sing it like a dwarf sings it. That would
Thank you for holding back
a lot of listeners. Thanks, Durin. Yeah, that was great. That's very nice of you to say about us being celebrities. That's very kind of you. I feel good.
Yeah.
Tyler, can I get your autograph after the show?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Another email.
We got one here from Tony. It's a follow-up email. So we got an email from Tony a while back in May, and he was talking about how he was going to open up his own brewery / arcade, and things have been going great. He says, "Hey guys, hope you guys have been great. Just finished listening to the recent episode about arcades. I heard you mentioned the brewery arcade in South Carolina. I emailed about a few months back and wanted to give a status update. We officially have a name, High Score Brewing. We also worked with a designer to create a logo that I love, and the logo is here, and it looks great. We should see if he wants us to post it in the Discord or something.
It's a really cool logo. We can just describe it. It's like a mug of beer, but the beer mug looks like a Nintendo cartridge.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's all
really
8-bit
cool.
styled. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
High Score Brewing. Says, we're working on creating 8 to 10 craft brews before seeking out a physical location. We have about 5 down so far, and we've been collecting vintage consoles to have at the location where people can play games from their childhood alongside newer games too. We're hoping to have a physical location open sometime next summer or late next year, but as soon as we do, it would be great to have y'all down here. Thanks, Tony."
That sounds so cool.
I think we should go. We should try to visit when they open up.
You know, I have family in North Carolina we could stay with, and we could road trip to South Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
We could do that. That would be super fun. I love the fact that he's going the route of getting vintage consoles instead of trying to get like arcade machines, because not saying that's bad, but arcade machines are like super hard to get. Like they've gone up in price because of all this whole nostalgia thing. And I feel like vintage consoles are a little more reasonable. And also, I've been to bars that have vintage consoles lying around. It's super fun. So, makes me happy. Okay, we'll say it one more time. It's High Score Brewing in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So, Google that if you want to go to South Carolina and support Tony, our dear friend. It's fantastic. All right. Final email. It's just the subject line is nostalgia with an exclamation point. This is from Colby. Hey there, Mike and Tyler, the Red Mage here. First of all, I am a longtime listener, and this podcast is my favorite on my pod rotation. Thank you for saying that. I look forward to the weekly episodes and really enjoy the book club style episodes, as well as the series you guys did on all the consoles and handhelds. On this week's episode, you talked about feeling nostalgia for an era you weren't a part of. If you have not heard of it, there is a phenomenon known as Vaporwave. Oh yes, Colby, you just started something. I hope you're ready. I went down a big Vaporwave rabbit hole not too long ago, and one of my main things about it is that it's supposed to make you feel nostalgic for something you weren't a part of or doesn't necessarily exist. I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's not only a fun genre of music, but also a fashion style and art aesthetic. Here's the dictionary.com definition. Vaporwave is a subgenre of electronic music, which features heavy sampling and editing, surreal and futuristic themes, and 1980s and 1990s imagery, musical styles, and consumer culture. Keep up the good work, guys, and thank you for this podcast. Thank you.
Thank
Colby.
you for allowing me to talk about Vaporwave for a minute.
When I read this email, I was just like, Tyler is going to stand up on his standing desk and scream about how much he loves Vaporwave, and I'm ready for it. You just opened the floodgates, Colby, for us to talk about Vaporwave.
I do really love Vaporwave for that reason that you're saying. It's like it sort of makes you nostalgia, but you're not quite sure what for. Like, as a person who, I guess I would say I lived on sort of like the tail end of maybe the era, the like 80s, 90s era that it sort of pretends to be nostalgic for, but it's not like this sounds like music that came out in the 80s and 90s. It doesn't really. What it sounds like, and this isn't my analogy that I've read it somewhere, but it sounds like you wandered into a mall that has been shut down for at least 10 years, but before shutting it down, the person who was in charge of whatever tape of music was playing, and it is a tape, like a cassette tape, just didn't turn it off, and it just kept playing for 10 years. And now it's all worn down, and it's like this like sort of mall music that sounds like kind of warped in places, and it sounds like it should be played at a mall, but because it's so like distorted and warped, you can tell that it has been neglected for a long time. And so you're in this empty mall that maybe some of the neon signs are like flickering, right? There's maybe a little bit of overgrowth, but not too much. It's still kind of clean. All the old stores that you recognize from the 90s are still there, but they have their like gates closed up on them, you know, and this and that. And then the music that is playing over the loudspeaker, that is what Vaporwave sounds like if you can imagine that. And then you can go listen to something by like Macintosh Plus, and that's like the Vaporwave aesthetic. But
I will always remember this because when you and I were in LA reconnecting after not talking for we weren't really super close in college. It was like right before we started this thing.
Like I knew you and like we were friendly, but we didn't hang out.
Yeah, we in LA when we started really hanging out a lot, and you wanted to get into Destiny, and we played it together. And Titan has what you refer to as the Vaporwave Mall. And it was your favorite place to be. And it was super fun to me because you love this place so much, this environment. And then that's what got me into it. And now I'm like super into it too. Yeah, it's just listening to this music that's not really nostalgic. But it feels nostalgic, but it's not. It's great.
It's the Savathun song Strike in Destiny 2, which isn't in the game anymore, perhaps appropriately, because, you know, it's now I'm nostalgic for something that doesn't exist anymore.
That's right. They made Vaporwave real. That's what they did. And then they took it away from you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the email. We really appreciate it. If you want to email us, you can do codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We use also a Discord we have. If you want to join our Discord, you can either email me and I'll send you a link, or go to my Twitter profile @Mecoletta, MECOLETTA. Click on the pinned tweet at the top. That's a Discord invite that never expires. Tyler is also on Discord. He's also on Discord, but he's also on Twitter @SneakerElf, ELPH. If you want to tweet at him about how much you love Vaporwave, he would really appreciate it, right? I don't want to speak for you, but I think you would appreciate it.
Tweet me your favorite Vaporwave albums.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I think that's it for the episode. A little longer episode, but we had a good time. A lot of tangents. I'm going to go on eBay and see if I can find a Zune. You want to say bye to everybody?
Sweet Home Alabama on UMD.
That's right.
Goodbye, everybody.
I'm trying to work on my, we do shock jock radio when we come in, but I want to work on my NPR voice.
NPR.
It's in the game.
It's in your ears.